Welcome in, everyone, to the It's Official podcast, created by Jeff Siegel, proudly hosted by Jeremy Plonk. First Bet and Express Bet representing here, and it is all about the Breeders' Cup. Less than 2 weeks away from the World Championships, about a week and a half now. Entries for the Breeders' Cup will be taken on Monday. So when the next time we reconvene next Tuesday, we'll know the fields for the World Championships at Del Mar. Our 5 topics last week on the podcast Talk Breeders' Cup. We're going to stay in that Breeders' Cup mode as well. Also get you our Goosebump Award winner for the week and our Star of Tomorrow. So big things going on in racing in the morning and in the afternoon as we prepare towards the Breeders' Cup. Of course, workouts, such a big deal between now and the final days of leading up to the championship races in all 14 divisions. Some of these horses will be horses we haven't seen before, coming from overseas, the Japanese Raiders, the European Raiders, how they train once they get to Del Mar and such. We'll take a closer look at that. Special welcome to those of you who will be looking on inside of the first Breeders' Cup wager guide. Be sure to check that out for all the stats, trends, handicapping analysis of all 14 divisions and everything you need to get set to bet the Breeders' Cup. All right, let's get started this week, and we start with the Jeff Siegel Goosebump Award, as we do each and every week here on the podcast. This is the horse who, in performance last week, got us most excited. Got the hair standing up on our neck, the goosebumps up on our arms. Typically, it happens in the afternoon, but this one, we're going to the morning. How about Sunday morning at Santa Anita at the Great Race Place? I want you to watch this workout. 6 furlongs in 1:10 and 4. For Sweet Azteca. She is a contender in the filly and mare sprint. And let me tell you, she is a very serious contender off of this workout. Now, Sweet Azteca last year coming up to the Breeders' Cup, they kind of moved the race around and ran her in the Chillingworth a little bit too close to the race, and she went sour on form, so they decided not to go forward with her, and she was ended up laid up for several months. She changes barn to Richie Baltus, just a light 2-race campaign this year, and she comes to the Breeders' Cup fresh. She looks like she's just in a gallop out there and just clicking off splits. Corners beautifully here, ears up, wanting to do more and not asked very much at all. You see the rider rather still, just a little bit of nudging with the elbows, but not much at all. This is mostly just hands and heels here coming through the wire and into the gallop out. She is absolutely coming up to this race sensational. This is one of the best workouts I've seen of all the works I've seen at First.TV leading up to this year's Breeders' Cup. And as she comes through the turn and finishes up the 6 furlongs for Richie Baltus, she comes off a win in the Great Lady M where she beat Copian. She comes off a prep in the Rancho Bernardo over the track at Del Mar. Just 2 starts this year, but again, it was the end of the campaign where she went sour last year. She looks like she is blossoming this year. The Goosebump Award winner, Sweet Azteca, I'll tell you what, that was a big time move for her, and she is going to be a handful in a filly and mare sprint division that looks really solid this year and really West Coast heavy. As we get through our topics here, we'll talk a lot about the Breeders' Cup, so let's just dovetail right from this Goosebump Award winner into the talk about the filly and mare sprint division this year. Let's look at our headlines and some of the horses to watch in the filly and mare sprint division. The Californians have already won a lot of the big road games this year. We talked about Hope Road going to the Ballerina and winning at Saratoga. Copian went on the road and won the Derby City Distaff at Churchill Downs. These fillies have held their own going across the country, and so when you look at the horses from California, they look to be the strongest in the filly and mare sprint division. 7 furlongs is always the separator when you talk about the filly and mare sprint division. This is not like the Breeders' Cup sprint at 6 furlongs, and a lot of the top races around the country in this division are at 6 furlongs a lot of times. But the 7/8 races like the Princess Rooney at Gulfstream, like the Ballerina, like the Derby City Distaff, we do get 7/8 races in this division, and that's an important key and an important separator. And when we talk about Sweet Azteca, as good as she's been and great as she's been, at 6.5, it would be her first test at 7, but she did win the Beholder Mile going 2 turns during her term last year. So Sweet Azteca, and one of those Californians to watch. Also, you've got Tamara for trainer Richard Mandela, winner of the Chillingworth Stakes last time out. Of course, she was Del Mar debutante winner as a 2-year-old. Obviously, loves the track there at Del Mar. Her stablemate Copian was probably head and shoulders above this division when we looked at things in May when she won the Derby City Distaff at Churchill Downs and did so impressively, kicking away. But Copian's last couple, maybe you worry a little. She got beat second in the Great Lady M, the Sweet Azteca, in a track record-setting performance in that one. Then they sent her long last time out in the Clement Hirsch. So if the goal was to come back to 7/8, curious spot there that they tried her in the Clement Hirsch going long. She ran second behind the expected favorite in the Breeders' Cup Distaff in Seismic Beauty. They weren't poor performances by any stretch. She's held her form, but wasn't as spectacular as she was in the spring. How good is Copian coming into the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint? That'll be a big question. Our Disaster, one of the many hopes in here for trainer Safi Joseph Jr. He's looking to pull a surprise for the second straight year in this race. Of course, he won last year's Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint via his Florida home base. Safi's got a handful in here as potential entrants. We'll see who he ends up in the final pre-entries, but horses like Hall and Ice and Our Disaster, a couple of them, Mystic Lake also under consideration. So Safi Joseph Jr. trying to come back here and win like he did last year in the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. If he's to do so, he's going to beat a very, very strong group of Californians. Again, Sweet Azteca, Hope Road for Baffert, Copian and Tamara for Richard Mandela. Phenomenal group of the Filly and Mare Sprint this year, all from the West Coast. But as we saw with the Goosebump Award winner, the way they're working, the way they're training, and this is a big workout. That workout Sunday for the filly that we looked at, Sweet Azteca, that's the work 2 weeks out. That's the key workout. So when you go back and you review the workouts for these Breeders' Cup horses, you want to see maybe how they're, acclimating to the conditions, how they're behaving, if they're pulling the rider around. But the last workouts for these final horses at Del Mar are going to be maintenance moves. These horses' big key workouts are at their home track typically before they ship down to Del Mar. 2 weeks out from any big races, the workout you really want to follow. And for Sweet Azteca, that's as good a 2 week out work as you're going to see for anybody, I think, coming into the Breeders' Cup. So that's our first topic this week on It's Official. I'm talking about the Filly and Mare Sprint Division. Let's go to our second topic this week on the big board. Buy or sell Japan in the 2025 Breeders' Cup. Remember when 2021 rolled around at Del Mar, how great the Japanese did that year. It was a tremendous set of performances where Marsh Lorraine pulled a huge upset in the Breeders' Cup Distaff. Then in the Filly and Mare Turf, Loves Only You, she was a little bit more logical on the tote board, but nonetheless a surprise to see Japan pull out two winners. Well, when they came back to Del Mar then from 2021 to last year in 2024 for a Breeders' Cup reunion, everybody bet the Japanese horses off the board. Remember, even in the 2-year-old races and the turf sprints and those kind of races, the Japanese horses were getting a tremendous amount of love, probably a little overcorrection by the public. So are we buying or selling the Japanese runners as we go into this year's races at Del Mar for the Breeders' Cup? Let's take a look at some of the headlines of the Japanese runners and the main players that we're talking about. I believe there could be as many as 9 in the pre-entries when they are announced on Wednesday officially, but we've got 5 main players circled for you. Will this be 2021 where they dominated, 2024 where they were overbet, or somewhere in between? It's a big question to answer as you get into your handicapping. Forever Young, he should be better at age 4. Remember, he was third last year in the Breeders' Cup Classic as a 3-year-old. And don't underestimate these Japanese horses in the pace analysis. Last year in the Classic, that extremely fast pace was set by Derma Sotogake. We have seen in past years, whether it be in Triple Crown races or in some of these Breeders' Cup races, the Japanese horses, they play a lot more to the pace like American horses do than what we're used to seeing from Europeans. Not all international shippers are built the same, is what I'm saying. So the Japanese horses can be big factors in the pace. They're certainly capable of putting up the big splits. Now let's talk about some of the main players. Forever Young. We mentioned Forever Young should be better now at age 4 than he was last year at 3. Let's pick up his last prep race last time out in Japan. His one and only prep. This is the Nippon TV High Stakes at Funabashi on October the 1st. He's going to be in second here, coming in the yellow cap, the 7 to engage the leader at this point. And this is a 1.125 prep with the left-hand turn, similar to what he's going to see at Del Mar, over a dirt racetrack, a really sandy, beachy racetrack at that, but nonetheless, a dirt racetrack. And Forever Young's going to get the victory here and get back on the beam after finishing third in the Dubai World Cup in the spring. Earlier in the year, prior to that, he won the Saudi Cup and beat Romantic Warrior Ushbo Tesoro, a really classy international field in that one. So Forever Young, since last year's Breeders' Cup, has won 3 of 4 starts. His only loss being that third in the Dubai World Cup. Is he better at 4 than he was at 3? If he is, this is going to be one heck of a classic because he adds to last year's top 3 finishers all coming back. Other horses that you want to kind of consider and look at in this year's Breeders' Cup from Japan, Alice Verite, potential for the Breeders' Cup Distaff or the filly and mare Turf. She's a filly who's kind of struggled this year. She ran 4th last year in the Breeders' Cup Distaff on the Turf behind Torpedo Anna and company in that 7-horse field. Her 4 starts this year haven't netted much. So Alice Verite is one who might get overplayed if she comes back. Last year she was 18-1 in the Distaff, depending on what field she runs in. We'll see what they do with her, but I don't think she's going to be a major contender in either field the way that she's running. American Stage in the sprint, one to keep an eye on in here. This is a horse who ran in the Dubai Golden Shaheen Group 1 back in Maidan in the spring. Only got beat 3.5 lengths in that race. Just one prep race in October. Yoshido Yahagi, the trainer of Forever Young and the trainer who had so much success here at Del Mar in 2021, is the trainer of American Stage. In the sprint for American Stage, could be very competitive here with the American sprinters, but it's a year where we've got the top 3 from the sprint back, so it's going to be difficult to kind of push your way into that mix, but it is a sprint without our top sprinter in America this year so far. So with the Bookham Dano defection from the Breeders' Cup Sprint, maybe it's opened up a bit here, and if you don't like the horses back from last year, American Stage could be a fresh face to that mix. Buy into Mischief. This was a Keeneland September sale for $500,000. So American Stage was meant to be good, has run really well in Japan, 7 of 9 in the exacta, and again coming off a second place finish last time out in the one prep October 5th, just beating a neck. Interesting one there. Switch in Love is a horse who's 1 for 2 lifetime juvenile fillies turf prospect for Yoshido Yohagi, stakes placed runner who won the career debut. Certainly must be respected there. And Argene, another one who's kind of a filly who doesn't really have a spot. She's kind of a in-betweener. What will she be able to pull off? She's a 2-time grade 3 winner over in Japan, group 2 place there, 4th in the grade 1 Victoria Mile. Maybe she's better at the mile distance on the turf, but will she stay against the gals and try the filly and mare turf, or even perhaps the distaff? A lot to see what happens there with that runner. So we'll see with Argene, another potential player from Japan. But if you ask me who the best Japanese shots would be, Forever Young and American Stage, probably the 2 that we want to respect the most from Japan. But we know the Japanese can pull off an upset here at Del Mar. We saw it back in 2021.
Warlike Goddess is moving quickly. She's moving right now, and she's moving to the lead as they come to the top of the stretch. A 5-wide rally by Warlike Goddess and Julia Lepereau. They've taken the lead. My Sister Nat follows that run. Love battles on from the inside. It is Warlike Goddess in front. On the inside, Love. On the outside, My Sister Nat. Love's Only You is coming. Here comes Love's Only You to win it for Japan.
Let's move to our third topic this week on It's Official. We look back at past races like Love's Only You winning in 2021. The Dirt Miles, kind of a greatest hits tour of the Breeders' Cup past as well. And you've got some defending champion type talking here with Full Serrano. We've got some past Breeders' Cup winners like Citizen Bull, potential for this year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Of course, he won the juvenile last year at age 3. It hasn't gone as well for Citizen Bull as you might hope for a champion 2-year-old and a horse who won the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. But here at a Dirt Mile, he could be potentially effective in there. There's also another runner in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile with some of that old greatest hits form in White Obario. He had his final workout this morning at Gulfstream Park, the prep for the Breeders' Cup, his final workout at Gulfstream, and now we'll head to Del Mar and get a run over the track there before going to the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Of course, a couple years ago, he won the Classic. Here's White Obario training in some serious heat, 45-4 for a half mile. Now, this is back in October 9th, about 2 weeks ago. But again, he has worked just this morning. We don't have the video yet for that workout. But White Obario is breathing fire in South Florida right now. And if you think about this horse for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, he was always kind of a surprise that he got the 1.25 miles in the Breeders' Cup Classic. So for this horse to be able to kind of shorten the game up a little bit, it might actually hit him like right in the, right in the crosshairs of what's best for him. So very interesting runner in this year's Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, White Abarrio. Now, in this work, they went fast, but he didn't go by the workmate. I'd like to see a little bit better finish up by him, not just a fast time. So he's got to come up to the race, to me, a little stronger than what he's showing here in this particular workout. Again, he's had a couple works since. I hope we get some video of the more recent work. But if you're looking at White Abarrio, don't just look at the times. That workout there, not as impressive maybe as you would like to see. You got horses like Nisos, who's kind of the something old is the 3 past champions on Breeders' Cup Day running back. Something new is Nisos, a horse who all year we've been kind of waiting to step up into some of the biggest races in the country. And Nisos, every time he kind of gets back training towards a big race, there'd be another physical setback with him. Baffert finally has him right, I think, maybe after the San Diego Handicap in July. Now a long layoff, hasn't run in August, September, or won't run in October as we get to November 1st. But Nisos, when he is good, as he was in the San Diego Stakes, he could be really good.
And they're into the stretch with Miramati to catch. Nisos finds a seam now. And here he comes at the 8th pole, bounding by Miramati. And then on the outside, it's Hall of Fame and Tarantino. But it is Nisos. Nisos and Flavian Pratt running away. And the San Diego in hand at the end to beat his stablemate Miramati.
Now, Nisos may be the favorite in this race, even though we have a defending champ in Full Serrano. Full Serrano's been training in recent weeks at Santa Anita. And you see him in the dark here, cutting through the darkness for a trainer, John Sadler. Full Serrano coming off a disappointing second last time out to the Baffert train at Nevada Beach, upset in the Goodwood Stakes. But that was at 1 1/8 miles. So he's come back out of that race just fine in terms of timing. Here he is working on October 11th, right on 14 days after running in the Goodwood Stakes. That's what you want to see in terms of timing. After a tough race like that, they stretched him out to 1 1/8 miles. Now the cut back to his best distance, which is the mile trip. Full Serrano's a horse maybe you could have looked at potentially trying the Breeders' Cup Classic if he would have ran off the screen there in the Goodwood Stakes. Remember, he ran in the Pacific Classic, ran second beat and a half length. It was a dull Pacific Classic back in 2024 when Mixto won that. But you could consider a horse like Full Serrano, since he had already won the Dirt Mile, as potentially a horse for the Breeders' Cup Classic if he would have shown that run off the screen sign last time out in the Goodwood. But his distance gets exposed a little bit against top-notch competition. They're coming back to the right spot for him at a mile distance. Full Serrano, another big name to look at in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. We talk about all these greatest hits. I mean, the past winners, like the juvenile winner we talked about, Citizen Bull, defending champ Full Serrano, past classic winner White Abarrio. What about a Kentucky Derby winner? We're like 5 names into this Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile and haven't mentioned Mystic Dan, the Kentucky Derby winner from 2024. He's coming off a win in the Lucas Classic at Churchill Downs at 1 1/8 miles. He'll cut back to the mile trip. Mystic Dan, like White Abarrio, was always one of those horses like, okay, you have a signature win in 1 1/4 miles. You can't knock a horse who, like White Abarrio, wins a 1 1/4 miles Breeders' Cup Classic, or Mystic Dan, who wins a 1 1/4 miles Kentucky Derby. But you always felt, even with White Abarrio and with Mystic Dan, that they're better a little bit shorter than those distances, even though they got their signature wins at the classic trip of 10 furlongs. Mystic Dan at a 2-turn mile like this could be extremely effective. We know he likes the inside rail run. We'll see what we get out of Mystic Dan. I don't know about a rider yet. I know Brian Hernandez is trying to get back in the saddle at Keeneland. He's been on horses in the morning. Will Brian Hernandez make it back in time to ride Mystic Dan in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile? What a story of comeback that would be. If you're not familiar with it, about 4 weeks ago, maybe now, during the September meet at Churchill, Brian Hernandez went down in a bad spill, broke 7 ribs, had a laceration of a lung, a kidney, all kinds of issues internally from that spill, and all kinds of internal damage, and has battled back quickly and already on horses in the morning in Kentucky. So Mystic Dan and a reunion with Brian Hernandez Jr. would just be an absolute storyline in a race loaded with horse racing stories on top of it. But again, Nisos could be any kind. He is literally a neck away from perfection in his career. His only loss was in a race where he had been off a year and 3 months and he came back in the toughest race run so far in 2025, the Churchill Downs Handicap, the race that was won by Mindframe, Banishing, Nysos. There were like 5 of them all on the wire together in that race. A phenomenal field in the Churchill Downs Handicap, and Nysos almost pulled it off after breaking, in the back of the pack. He was out of his normal comfort zone, rallied up, and almost won that race in a slop. He could be any kind. I mean, Nysos, I think, will go favorite in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Let's see what we get in terms of pace. He's not a runoff speed horse by any stretch. He likes to kind of stalk and pounce. Citizen Bull might be the target in there. He's certainly a horse who loves to go to the front. Full Serrano would go to the front in his typical performances. If Most Wanted goes in the field, we'll see where he is in terms of pace. If that one for Brad Cox happens to go. Again, we are waiting pre-entries to be announced Wednesday. We are recording this podcast on Tuesday, the 21st. Pre-entries will be announced on Wednesday, the 22nd. So a lot to talk about in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Like I said, it's a greatest hits album, 3 past Breeders' Cup champions, and a Kentucky Derby winner expected to be in the field. And none of those 4 are going to be the favorite. Nysos will be the favorite, I'm sure, in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile. Of all the divisions that we've run of the Breeders' Cup, all the editions we've run of the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile in the past, I don't think any of them compare to this one. This one, if the field stays together, has the potential to be the best dirt mile we have ever seen. Best ever? Well, that's topic number 4 as we discuss things this week on the It's Official podcast. There's a lot of people debating, could this year's Breeders' Cup Classic be the best ever? Well, if you're going to have that talk, you're going to go back to 1998 to discuss the Breeders' Cup Classic, because that, to me, was, to this point, the best Breeders' Cup Classic we have ever seen. I had the fortune of being there in 1998 as part of the track notes team and working with Breeders' Cup, going through in the stable area, getting morning notes. At that point, I was 27 years old, back 27 years ago. So half my life ago, but I remember that Breeders' Cup Classic because it was just so remarkably good in 1998. I mean, you think of the horses that were in that field, and we're going to talk about all of them in a second, and really try to play a little comparison game between the 1998 Breeders' Cup Classic field and this year's Classic. You always have to worry that newer people to the game or younger people will put too much emphasis on the now, and veteran people and older people like myself will kind of hug and embrace yesteryear and always claim that the older was better and things just aren't like they used to be. But this isn't a get off my lawn argument. This is one we're going to kind of look at and kind of give a little bit of thought to, because I actually think it is a very reasonable debate of which year was the best Breeders' Cup Classic. You know who's going in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. We've got an unbelievable field lining up the top 3 finishers from last year's Classic, of course. You've got Sierra Leone, you've got Fierceness, you've got Forever Young, you've got the world-beating 3-year-old Sovereignty and his mates who've been chasing him throughout the course of the year in Journalism and Baeza, a phenomenal group of horses that include 4 from trainer Todd Pletcher. Fierceness you've already heard about. There's Antiquarian, there's Locke, there's Mindframe. Just really tremendous depth in this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. As good as we have seen, in no doubt in my mind, at least since 1998. But the debate with 98 will rage on a little bit. So let's talk about that as we look at topic 4 here on this week's It's Official podcast. Let's go back to the 1998 Breeders' Cup Classic for the younger audience out there, or people who've gotten into racing in the last 27 years. You know, maybe you don't remember the 1998 Classic. Put a video together for you, a video courtesy of Breeders' Cup, NBC, and YouTube. Full replay of the 1998 Breeders' Cup Classic, field of 10, and kind of pop-up video style. There's going to be some stat infographics along with the running of the race to kind of remind you just who was in that field and how good they were.
Ready for the start. And they're off in the Breeders' Cup Classic. And Coronado's Quest is the first away from the gate. Arch was off to a good beginning. Skip Away is in behind Arch in the early stages. Silver Charm is ahead of Skip Away. He's third. And the outside gentleman races fourth. As they pass beneath the twin spires for the first time, it is Coronado's Quest to be the pacemaker. Arch is second. And the 2 grays on the inside. Skip Away on the outside. Derby winner Silver Charm. In behind them at the inside, European Swain. Running Stag is just next to Silver Charm. 2 lengths back. On the outside, it's Gentleman. Then a break of 3 to stablemates. Awesome again. And Touch Gold. 7 lengths. Back to Belmont winner Victory Gallop. He is about a dozen lengths from the lead. The opening quarter goes in 23 and 2/5 seconds. The opening half mile was 47 and 3. It's an honest pace here in the Classic with Coronado's Quest leading the way, prompted by Arch. Skip Away is tucked away on the inside. There appears to be a narrow opening for him, and there he goes. Gary Bailey asking a little bit more from Skip Away. Silver Charm in a good spot on the outside as they approach the far turn. And Gentleman starts his engine as they move for the far turn. He's only 3 lengths from the lead. Swain is in behind Horses, then Running Stag. Awesome again on the inside, Touch Gold. And still well behind is Victory Gallop. It is still Coronado's Quest leading this all-star field around the far turn. He's there by a length and a half. Arch is in between Horses. Skip Away is still down toward the inside. Here comes Silver Charm. Silver Charm coming with a bold rally on the far outside. Skip Away toward the inside, and Swain is coming with his rally. And farther back it is Awesome again. Victory Gallop is gathering momentum. 1 furlong to go. Coronado's Quest, Silver Charm, and Swain, the 3 of them. Not today for Skip Away. Victory Gallop continues to close. Silver Charm short lead. Here comes Awesome again, who's flying in between Horses. A wild finish to the Classic. Awesome again has won. Awesome again is the winner. A 3-way photo for second among Victory Gallop, Silver Charm, and Swain, who went to the far outside. And there is the race winner, Pate, with Awesome again coming from well off the pace today. Skip Away will not be the all-time money winner, and there is a jubilant Pate aboard the winner. Disappointment for Skip Away in the Classic.
It's just a wild race, a wild finish, and a wild week at Churchill Downs that week. As I recall back in the days leading up to that Breeders' Cup Classic in 1998 and the Breeders' Cup week, there was a UPS plane that was flying into Louisville that had engine damage, and part of the engine literally dropped off the plane while it was flying over Churchill Downs. I don't remember if it was landing or taking off at the Louisville airport where UPS is based, but engine parts hit the barn where Skip Away was stabled, and there was some talk that spooked Skip Away during the week. And I know while he was training, he was really rank and really strong-headed the rest of the week and all week at Churchill Downs. Things just didn't go right for Skip Away that week. As mentioned in the graphic there, watching the replay of the race, he dumped his exercise rider after work one morning. I remember standing next to Sonny Hine, the trainer of Skip Away, watching his horse train, and other media were kind of gaggled around him while he watched his horse gallop out or gallop by. And Sonny was bragging, the boy can't hold him, talking about the exercise rider. And Sonny thought that was a good sign. But as a handicapper, I looked at it even back then, it was like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if he's coming up to his best race training that way. And that's why I kind of mentioned when you watch these horses train on video leading up to the Breeders' Cup at Del Mar, it's not about the work and the time now. They're done with that. The good, strong, important work is already done towards the Breeders' Cup. It's about getting acclimated. It's about how the horse is pulling the rider or relaxing or taking cues. That's what you want to see in these final works and gallops over the track at Del Mar. Horses who are kind of cantankerous and running off and having mental issues and such. Look, if they're doing that in the morning just because there's a gaggle of press around and a handful of onlookers and cameras and people clicking around them and such, they're not going to do too well with a full capacity crowd at Del Mar on race day, most likely. So those are the kind of things you want to look at. And looking back to 1998, there were some telltale signs there that it might be the end for Skip Away. Plus, he was towards the end of his career, a fabulous career in which he won 18 of 38 for $9.6 million. Again, if he would have gotten the third place finish in that Breeders' Cup Classic, Skip Away would have passed Cigar as the all-time leading money earner. So let's talk about that 1998 field against what we have this year. I did a lot of comparisons, looked at the records of all the horses and such, and put together a little head-to-head graphic, if you will. There were 11 horses right now looking as probables for this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. So I ranked the top 10, and you'll see here on the graphic here in a second, as we go to that there were 10 in the field for the Breeders' Cup in 1998 for the Classic. Right now we're looking at 11. So if we rank the horses 1 through 10 in terms of lifetime earnings, and just went head-to-head, because you say, well, how do we compare these two fields? Well, if you try to compare the two fields lifetime, The 1998 field lifetime won 99 races. This year's field combined has won 59 to this point. It was 99 for 216, so about a 48% win rate for the horses back in 1998. This year's group, 59 out of 110, so well over 50%, 51, 52% a win rate. So a higher win rate for this year's field than the 1998 field, but not certainly the depth. The 1998 field was certainly more experienced than older. Average age, 4.2 years. This year's field, the average age is 3.7, with a good amount of 3-year-olds looking to go into this year's field, including Baeza, Nevada Beach, Journalism, and, of course, Sovereignty. So when you look at these two fields, $45.8 million is the earnings for this year's field. That is very impressive. The 1998 field earned $37.7 million. So this year's field has earned $8 million more than that field. You're going to have the earnings from this year's Breeders' Cup that get lumped into that career total. So that's a big number, this year's field. But when you adjust for inflation, the $37.7 million earned by the 98 group is worth about $75 million right now. So can this year's Breeders' Cup Classic field, which is currently at $45 million, get their career earnings up to $75 million? That would be what we're talking about in terms of matching up dollar for dollar. Let's talk about these horses head to head. It's a little bit of fun. Let's go through the exercise. Skip Away versus Forever Young. These are the two biggest money earners in each year's field. Forever Young has won $15.7 million. So when you talk about the $37 million total for this year's field, one horse came up with $15 million of that, 37. So almost half of the earnings, about 40% of the earnings for the field, is Forever Young alone. That, again, kind of sways things to show you just how strong the 98 group was. I put the stars next to the head-to-head matchups where I think the horses had the advantage. I'll take Skip Away over Forever Young any day. Silver Charm head-to-head with Sierra Leone. Silver Charm won 12 of 24 for $7 million. $7 million also the current earnings for Sierra Leone, who's 5 for 13. Not a big difference in there, but when you look at Silver Charm being a Derby, Preakness, Dubai World Cup type winner, the credentials just higher for Silver Charm. Awesome Again and Sovereignty. Awesome Again won that year's Breeders' Cup Classic, surprised the field a bit under Pat Day, who was the local star rider. He benefited from Swain drifting out. Gary Stevens aboard Silver Charm went left-handed to go find Swain because he thought that was the main rival, and then Pat Day snuck up on the inside. It was an undefeated season that year at age 4 for Awesome Again, but I can't say in my heart of hearts that he is a better horse than what we've seen from Sovereignty. That's a good resume for Awesome Again, but right now Sovereignty to me already has surpassed what I believe Awesome Again was in talent. As for Swain and Fierceness, I almost gave this a half-half. But when you look at Swain, his international resume, on dirt, you could make the argument Fierceness is the better of the two. Swain had good races on the dirt, hit the board in the Dubai World Cup, in the Breeders' Cup Classic. But on turf, he was also top 4 finisher a couple times in the Arc de Triomphe. Multiple Grade 1, Group 1 wins in Europe on turf. Swain was an absolute star. He won 10 of 22 for about $3.8 million. Fierceness is 7 of 13. So you can make an argument. This is probably the biggest toss-up to me of the matchups. To Gentleman and Journalism, Gentleman, the star of the West Coast. He was an Argentine export for Richard Mandela. Won 13 of 24 for $3.6 million. Journalism 6 for 10, but he hasn't gotten outside of the 3-year-old ranks yet. He didn't win the big ones in the Classic or in the Derby and in the Belmont. He did get a Classic win in the Preakness Stakes. This was a tough call for me as well, but at a 1.25 miles in a Breeders' Cup type situation, I think Gentleman was slightly more talented, but again, a tough call in this spot. Another tough call between Victory Gallop, the Belmont Stakes winner of 1998. Victory Gallop denied Real Quiet's Triple Crown. He would go on to become champion older horse the next year. Lock just doesn't quite have enough resume, came up a bit short in some of the, the bigger lifetime races that Lock has been in. Hasn't come up to the races or hasn't come up to the big races like we had seen. There's the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. Lock ran 3rd in that particular spot. Pegasus World Cup ran 2nd in that particular spot. Did win the Santa Anita Handicap very impressively. But again, the biggest races on this horse's resume, the Pegasus World Cup and the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, were both losses for Lock. That's why I gave the edge to Victory Gallop, a Belmont Stakes winner who almost pulled off the victory, rallying from far back in that 1998 Breeders' Cup. Classic. Coronado's request and mind frame. Coronado's request and mind frame kind of similar to me in talent and ability, but I like what mind frame has done this year. I mean, I know the Jock got knocked off in the Jockey Club Gold Cup, but the Stephen Foster flat out beat a Breeders' Cup Classic winner head to head when he beat Sierra Leone. He won the Churchill Downs Handicap, which was the absolute race of the year so far this year. Mind frame has run 8 times, other than the Jock falling off, really 7. 5 wins, 2 seconds. There's no inconsistency to his game whatsoever. He won the race of the year so far to me. While Coronado's Quest was a good horse, I don't think that his resume stacked up, even with a Haskell and Haskell Travers winner. I think Mindframe actually has the better resume. I'll take him in a head-to-head matchup. Touch Gold, the Belmont Stakes winner from 1997, denied Silver Charms Triple Crown. I think he's a clear-cut head over Highland Falls. Highland Falls doesn't have the credentials to me that you're talking about with a classic winner in Touch Gold. And when you look at the two horses matched up lifetime, Touch Gold 6 of 15 for 1.6, 6 of 13 for Highland Falls. They're both 6-time winners. 1.6 million for Highland Falls here with all the inflation to go with it. But you don't have that Belmont Stakes victory in there. Touch Gold almost won the Preakness too after falling to his face in 1997. Really good and a decent 4-year-old season as well. You go down to Running Stag and Baeza. Running Stag was the international entrant who came to the U.S. and he was a veteran by the time this 98 Classic came around. He only won 7 of 40 lifetime, but he earned $1.6 million and got most of his wins in like grade 2 company when he got away from the big names in the division. When the big names in the division were there, Running Stag didn't stack up. I know you can make that same argument for Baeza, but I actually think Baeza's got more talent than what we saw in Running Stag. Running Stag has the longevity in terms of a resume, but to me, Baeza the better horse of the two. And then finally, Arch is the final earner. Was only a horse who had 7 career starts. His 7th and final start there, I believe, was in the Breeders' Cup, or that might have been his 6th start. He had only had 1 loss to that point. Arch had won the Super Derby, but Antiquarian, Nevada Beach, neither one to me kind of has the edge on Arch. And of course, Arch went on to a really good stallion career, as we know. That one could have, you could make some arguments back and forth on that, but I don't think that there's a ton there on the resume for Antiquarian or Nevada Beach to kind of step up there. I'll take Arch in that matchup. So of the 10 horses head to head, I've got it 7-3 that 1998 had the better horses. But when you take a look at the overall numbers and that not just the head-to-heads, because you could say, well, let's match them a different way, and you might come up with a different thing than a 7-3 finish, right? If the horses were matched up based on their order of finish in the race, we don't know yet for this year's Classic, obviously, the order of finish. But by doing it by rankings, I think the 1998 is still slightly ahead, but the resumes aren't written for these horses in the 2025 group. Remember, these horses, like last year's group, 3 came back at 4. Which of these 3s are going to come back next year and do some good things? Probably a lot to retirement, I'm sure, but there's still a lot to be written maybe for this year's particular field that we had the benefit of postscript with that 1998 cast to come back and say, well, yes, this horse, like a Victory Gallop, ran so well in that race at 3. At 4, he came back the next year and was the champion older male. So there's a chance that some of these horses that we're looking at for this year's field in 2025 might have their best work still ahead of them, and the argument will continue on in the future. But if you told me right now today on October 21st, this year's Breeders' Cup Classic might be the second best Classic that we've seen in 40-plus years of the Breeders' Cup. It was fun to go down memory lane, go back and remember those times walking around Churchill Downs back then as a young 27-year-old with a big head of hair. Oh, those were the days. Let's wrap things up on this week's It's Official podcast. We always finish up with a Star of Tomorrow on our weekly podcast. If you're checking this out around Breeders' Cup time, we do it each and every Tuesday. Our Stars of Tomorrow segment leave you with a positive step of a horse coming out of the maiden ranks most times who might be one you want to keep your eye on. We've got a special one for you. I'm going to show you the horse this week and then talk about him in the postscript. Dr. Kapoor from Keeneland, your Star of Tomorrow, a winner in Lexington.
Rainbow 5th final furlong. Dr. Kapoor, Fuzzbuster looking for room. Tried to come up the rail, has to change lanes, and try to make a go between horses. 16th to go, though. Dr. Kapoor, 3-length lead. And then Chip Honcho and Fuzzbuster. Dr. Kapoor, Irad Ortiz Jr. aboard. Dr. Kapoor to win it. And then it was Chip Honcho and Fuzzbuster.
Dr. Kapoor and the Ramsey Silks, a horse special to owner Ken Ramsey. Dr. Kapoor was the surgeon who performed a kidney transplant last year on Ken Ramsey, named the horse after him, and a big-time win for the Safi Joseph trainee in the second career start, a popular win at Keeneland last week. Dr. Kapoor ran 6 furlongs of the 7-furlong split, faster than 3 other 6-furlong races on the card. It was a really good sprint performance. He won by 2 3/4 lengths, and Ramsey says next, they're going to the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes the Saturday after Thanksgiving at Churchill Downs. So we're going to get a stakes look at Dr. Kapoor. But a feel-good story there, and a horse can obviously run. Big-time effort there. Again, 6-furlong split, was faster than the 6-furlong races that day, and then came home the fastest, a final 8th, looking very strong as well to win by daylight. Dr. Kapoor, this week's star of tomorrow. Let's wrap up the 5 topics on It's Official this week as we go through the rundown of all 5. We started things off with our Goosebump Award winner. It was a big-time workout on Sunday for Sweet Azteca. Keep an eye on this Richie Baltas trainee as she heads towards the Breeders' Cup Filly and Mare Sprint. Buy or sell Japan in the 2025 Breeders' Cup. Is it going to be more like 2021 when they were dominant, or 2024 when people bet them but they didn't quite live up to expectations? Forever Young, looked decent in his prep. He's probably the best chance for Japan in 2025. The Dirt Mile has become the greatest hits tour. 3 past champions in Breeders' Cup races are all squaring off in this year's Breeders' Cup Mile on the dirt. And, of course, the Dirt Mile also includes Kentucky Derby winner from 2024, Mystic Dan. Great names on the list, but it might be Niceos's race the way he has shown immense talent. We had our classic debate for 98. Versus 2025. Was the Breeders' Cup Classic of 1998 or 2025 the best ever? 2025 still has a couple pages to write in their chapters, but for me, 1998 still slightly the best. What a year. And our star tomorrow, Dr. Kapoor, winner last Thursday at Keeneland for Safi Joseph Jr., headed next to the Kentucky Jockey Club Stakes. Those 5 topics are now official because our handicapper emeritus, Jeff Siegel, and I say so. That's the way we've always played the game here on It's Official. Be sure to check out that Breeders' Cup Wager Guide presented by First. To check that out at news.first.com and click on the Wager Guide section. It'll be available starting on Wednesday after pre-entries come out for this year's Breeders' Cup and be updated with handicapping information all throughout Breeders' Cup week. More updated workouts, more stats, trends, handicapper analysis, thoughts on all the races, all 14 divisions for you. Enjoy the Breeders' Cup. I'll be back next week with a lot of handicapping insights towards the big championship days at Del Mar. Have a great day, everybody.